CarMax just pulled back the curtain, and what buyers are seeing is sending shockwaves through the used car market. Prices that were supposed to cool off are doing something very different, and shoppers across America are staring at screens in disbelief. For years, CarMax has been the safe option, the transparent dealer, the place where prices made sense. That trust is now being tested in real time. Here's what's driving people crazy. Vehicles that should be depreciating are holding stubbornly high price tags, while others are swinging wildly with sudden drops that make no logical sense. A 3-year-old sedan with average mileage is priced like it's still brand new, while a slightly older SUV might suddenly look like a clearance item. Buyers are asking the same question over and over again. Who is actually setting these prices, and what do they know that we don't? CarMax says it's all about data, algorithms, and market demand, but buyers scrolling through listings are seeing patterns that don't line up with their wallets. Interest rates are still elevated, household budgets are tighter than ever, yet CarMax prices suggest a market that refuses to admit reality. Shoppers walk in expecting deals and walk out feeling like they just dodged a financial trap. What's even more shocking is how fast these prices are changing. A car saved to your favorites last week can jump by thousands of dollars overnight. Another one can suddenly drop just enough to make you think you're winning, until you realize the monthly payment barely moves because financing costs eat the difference alive. Buyers aren't just confused, they're angry. Sales staff are feeling it too. Customers come in armed with screenshots, comparisons, and spreadsheets demanding explanations. Why was this cheaper 2 days ago? Why is this higher than the same car down the street? The old CarMax promise of simple, stress-free buying is cracking under the weight of a market that no longer behaves rationally. And then there's the trade-in shock. Owners expecting strong offers are being hit with numbers that feel like a slap in the face. CarMax is clearly protecting itself, tightening margins, and shifting risk back onto consumers. Buy high, trade low. That imbalance is pushing loyal customers to the edge. The most unsettling part is what this signals for the entire used car industry. CarMax doesn't move alone. When it adjusts prices, the market notices. Dealers follow. Online platforms react. Buyers get squeezed from every angle. What looks like a CarMax pricing update may actually be a warning sign that the used car market is entering a new, far more painful phase. Because if these prices are the new normal, and if demand really is softening the way the data suggests, then something has to give next. And when it does, the fallout won't just hit buyers, it will hit dealers, lenders, and anyone who thought the chaos was finally over, especially as more shoppers start realizing that waiting might not save them at all, but jumping in right now could be the most expensive mistake they make all year. When you look at what's quietly happening behind the scenes with inventory levels, financing pressure, and the growing gap between asking prices and what people can realistically afford as this story keeps unfolding. Behind the scenes, inventory is stacking up in ways CarMax does not openly advertise. Lots that once turned over cars in days are now holding them for weeks, sometimes months, and that changes everything. The longer a vehicle sits, the more pressure builds, yet the pricing on the screen often refuses to reflect that reality. Buyers sense something is off, like they're being asked to play a game where the rules keep changing. What's fueling the outrage even more is how different the experience feels depending on what you're shopping for. Economy cars that everyday people rely on for work and family are staying painfully expensive, while higher-end models are starting to show cracks. That tells a clear story. Affluent buyers are pulling back first, and CarMax knows it, so prices get adjusted quietly, selectively, almost surgically, leaving budget-conscious shoppers feeling punished for needing a car instead of wanting one. Financing is where the frustration really boils over. A price that looks barely acceptable on the surface becomes shocking once the numbers are broken down. Monthly payments balloon. Loan terms stretch longer and longer. Buyers walk in focused on the sticker price and walk out realizing the real cost is buried in interest, fees, and extended terms that lock them in for years. That realization is why so many deals are falling apart at the last minute. Online forums and social media are lighting up with stories. Buyers comparing notes, screenshots shared, deals backed out of. The narrative is shifting fast. CarMax is no longer being talked about as the easy choice, but as the expensive one. Once that perception takes hold, it's hard to reverse, and you can feel the tension building across the market. What makes this moment dangerous is timing. We're at a point where consumer confidence is fragile. People are delaying big make purchases. Any sign of manipulation or unfair pricing hits harder than it used to. CarMax's data-driven strategy may make sense on a spreadsheet, but emotionally, it's clashing head-on with a buyer base that feels squeezed, ignored, and pushed too far. And while CarMax insists this is all temporary, a response to short-term volatility, history tells a different story. When pricing models shift, they rarely snap back overnight. They become the baseline. That means buyers waiting for a full return to normal may be waiting much longer than they expect, all while paying more just to stay mobile in a system that feels increasingly stacked against them. The pressure doesn't stop there. Competitors are watching closely, and some are already adjusting their own numbers to match or slightly undercut CarMax, creating the illusion of deals without actually restoring affordability. It's a race to the bottom for trust, not prices, and buyers are caught in the middle trying to decide whether to jump now, wait it out, or walk away entirely as the market sends mixed signals that grow louder by the day, especially as more data points start to leak about how many buyers are actually walking away at the last second when the true cost becomes clear, and that trend continues to spread quietly but rapidly across showrooms and websites everywhere. That last-second walkaway is becoming the most powerful signal in the market, and CarMax knows it. Deals collapsing right before signatures tell a brutal truth that no press release can hide. Buyers are no longer emotionally committing the way they used to. They're cautious, suspicious, and far more willing to say no. When that behavior spreads, pricing models start to wobble. Internally, this creates a balancing act that is getting harder by the week. Lower prices too fast, and CarMax risks admitting the market has been overvalued for months. Hold prices too high, and inventory keeps piling up, tying up capital and increasing carrying costs. That tension is why pricing feels erratic. Small drops here, sudden increases there. It's not randomness, it's hesitation. Another factor quietly reshaping prices is repossessions. As more borrowers fall behind, more vehicles re-enter the system. That should push prices down. But instead of immediate relief, those vehicles are being carefully filtered, reconditioned, and fed into the market slowly to avoid shocking prices all at once. Buyers sense this artificial pacing, even if they can't fully explain it. The emotional impact on shoppers is heavy. People aren't just buying transportation, they're buying security. A reliable car means getting to work, keeping a job, maintaining normal life. When prices feel manipulative, trust evaporates. And once trust is gone, even fair deals start to look suspicious. CarMax's reputation was built on clarity and consistency, fixed pricing, no haggling, no games. What buyers are seeing now feels like a departure from that identity, not because the company suddenly changed its values, but because the market forced it into a corner where every decision has consequences and none of them are clean. The danger is what happens next if sentiment continues to sour. Fewer buyers walking through the door means less real-world data to justify current prices. Online engagement drops, test drives slow. The feedback loop that once kept prices accurate becomes distorted, feeding on outdated assumptions while the ground shifts underneath. And this is where anxiety turns into fear, because when a major player like CarMax struggles to align prices with reality, it signals deeper stress in the system. Used cars don't exist in isolation. They're tied to new car sales, lending standards, insurance costs, and consumer debt levels. A crack in one area spreads fast. Buyers watching these prices climb, stall, and wobble are starting to ask a dangerous question. What does CarMax know that we don't? Is a bigger correction coming, or is this the last attempt to squeeze value out before the floor drops? That uncertainty is freezing decision-making across the market, and as more people hesitate, the pressure intensifies even further, especially with another wave of inventory expected to hit just as affordability reaches a breaking point, and the gap between what cars are listed for and what people can actually pay continues to stretch tighter and tighter as this situation keeps escalating. That growing gap is the real story nobody wants to admit out loud. Listing prices are floating in one reality, while buyer paychecks are stuck in another. CarMax is caught right in the middle, trying to defend margins while the financial gravity keeps pulling everything down. The result is a market that looks stable on the surface, but feels brittle the moment you touch it. You can see it in the way shoppers behave. More browsing, less buying, more time spent comparing the same car across multiple platforms. Buyers are no longer trusting a single source. They're cross-checking every listing, every price change, every so-called deal. And when CarMax comes out higher, even by a little, that hesitation turns into a hard stop. There's also a psychological shift happening. For years, people accepted that used cars were expensive because they had no choice. Now that narrative is breaking. Buyers are questioning everything. Do I really need this upgrade? Can I stretch my current car another year? Should I walk away entirely? Every no chips away at the momentum that kept prices elevated. Behind closed doors, this forces CarMax to make uncomfortable decisions. Discount quietly and risk devaluing inventory already on the books. Hold firm and watch traffic thin out. Neither option is safe, and the longer this standoff lasts, the more dramatic the eventual adjustment becomes. Markets do not correct gently when pressure builds for too long. What makes buyers lose their minds is the unpredictability. One day, a price drop sparks hope. The next day, a similar vehicle is listed higher with no explanation. That inconsistency erodes confidence faster than high prices alone ever could. People can accept expensive, they struggle to accept confusing. This is where fear turns into speculation. Shoppers start thinking they're being timed, nudged, tested, that algorithms are watching their clicks, raising prices when interest spikes, lowering them just enough to keep attention. Whether that's fully true or not, almost doesn't matter. Perception becomes reality in markets driven by trust, and as this perception spreads, the ripple effects grow stronger. Independent dealers feel pressure to justify their own pricing. Online marketplaces adjust benchmarks. Lenders tighten terms. All of it traces back to a simple problem that keeps getting bigger. Affordability has hit a wall. If CarMax, with all its data and scale, can't smooth out this imbalance, then the market is heading toward a moment where something has to break. Prices, demand, inventory, or all three at once. Buyers sense that moment is coming, and that's why so many are freezing, watching, waiting, knowing that the next move could define the market for years, especially as more warning signs quietly stack up in the background and the tension continues to build with every passing week. Those warning signs are becoming harder to ignore. Service departments are seeing older vehicles kept on the road longer. Repair spending is climbing because people would rather fix than finance. That behavior only shows up when buyers feel trapped, and it's a clear signal that the buying cycle is breaking down at the consumer level. CarMax can see this data in real time, and that's what makes the current pricing strategy feel so aggressive. When fewer people are willing to buy, every transaction matters more. Each sale has to carry more profit to make up for lost volume. That pressure quietly pushes prices higher, even as demand softens, creating a feedback loop that frustrates buyers even further. What's changing fast is buyer leverage. For the first time in years, the power is slowly shifting back toward consumers, but it's happening unevenly. Certain regions are seeing deeper discounts. Certain models are suddenly negotiable in ways they weren't before. But because CarMax's model is built on consistency, those cracks feel shocking when they appear. And once buyers realize some people are getting better deals than others, the outrage multiplies. Fairness matters. Transparency matters. When prices feel arbitrary, trust collapses. Shoppers don't feel smart walking away anymore. They feel justified. Another layer adding fuel to the fire is insurance. Higher premiums are making already expensive vehicles even harder to justify. A price that barely works on paper becomes impossible once insurance quotes roll in. That extra cost kills deals instantly, and CarMax's pricing doesn't always reflect that real-world burden. The tension is now spilling beyond buyers into investors and analysts. When a company built on predictable volume and pricing starts to show volatility, people start asking hard questions. Is this just a temporary mismatch, or is the used car market structurally different now? That uncertainty doesn't stay contained. It filters down to showrooms and websites. And here's the part that keeps buyers glued to their screens. Every small price drop feels like the first crack in a dam. Every stubbornly high listing feels like denial. People are watching CarMax not just to buy a car, but to understand where the market is headed next. Because when a giant like this blinks, it usually signals a much bigger shift coming right behind it. The longer this standoff continues, the sharper the eventual move will be. Markets hate hesitation. They reward clarity. Right now, CarMax pricing reflects a company caught between two realities, and buyers are caught in the crossfire, waiting for the moment when one side finally gives, especially as more subtle signs emerge that inventory pressure is no longer theoretical, and the strain is starting to show in ways that can't be hidden much longer as this situation continues to intensify. That strain is beginning to surface in quiet but telling ways. Vehicles are being rotated more frequently across locations. Listings are refreshed, reposted, and subtly reworded to keep them from looking stale. To the casual shopper, it looks like movement. To experienced buyers, it looks like inventory that is not clearing the way it should. CarMax's entire model depends on velocity. When cars move quickly, pricing power stays strong. When they slow down, everything changes. Carrying costs rise, reconditioning budgets tighten, and suddenly, holding firm on price becomes less about confidence and more about survival. That's the tension buyers are feeling every time they refresh a listing. You can hear it in customer conversations. People aren't asking, "Is this a good deal?" anymore. They're asking, "Is this the best time to buy or the worst?" That shift in mindset is dangerous for any retailer. It turns every price tag into a question mark and every purchase into a gamble. At the same time, new car incentives are quietly creeping back. That's a problem. When brand new vehicles start closing the price gap, used cars lose their strongest advantage. Buyers start comparing monthly payments instead of sticker prices, and suddenly that used car doesn't look so safe anymore. CarMax is now competing on multiple fronts at once, against traditional dealers offering incentives, against private sellers adjusting faster, against buyer psychology that has finally snapped after years of pressure. Each of those forces pushes pricing in a different direction, and the result is the volatility buyers are reacting to. What's especially unsettling is how quickly sentiment has flipped. Just months ago, people rushed to buy before prices went higher. Now they hesitate, convinced that waiting might save them thousands. That expectation alone can freeze a market, and once it sets in, it's incredibly hard to reverse. And while CarMax continues to promote stability and confidence, the data tells a more complicated story. Transaction volume matters more than listed prices, and when fewer deals close, the truth eventually surfaces. Discounts become less optional, adjustments become unavoidable. Buyers watching this unfold feel like they're standing on the edge of a shift that hasn't fully arrived yet. They sense the pressure building, they see the inconsistencies, they feel the anxiety in every number, and they know that whatever comes next won't be subtle, because markets don't unwind quietly after this much strain, especially when a company as large and influential as CarMax is involved, and the ripple effects are already spreading far beyond a single brand as this story continues to develop. Those ripple effects are now reaching places most buyers never think about, and that's what makes this moment so critical. Auction prices are starting to wobble, lenders are reassessing risk, wholesale values are no longer moving in one clean direction. That uncertainty flows straight back to retail pricing, and CarMax sits right at that intersection. When wholesale weakens but retail refuses to follow, tension builds. Something has to realign. Either CarMax accepts thinner margins, or buyers continue to walk. Neither outcome is comfortable, and the longer the delay, the sharper the eventual adjustment becomes. Buyers feel that pressure, even if they don't see the spreadsheets behind it. There's also a growing divide between informed buyers and casual shoppers. Those who track price history are noticing patterns. Price drops that happen in stages, small cuts that test reaction, listings pulled and relisted at new numbers. This is pricing by probe, not by confidence, and it's making experienced buyers more patient, not more eager. Casual shoppers, on the other hand, feel overwhelmed. Too many numbers, too many variables, too much noise. That confusion doesn't lead to purchases, it leads to paralysis, and paralysis is deadly for volume-driven businesses. CarMax's challenge is no longer just about pricing cars, it's about restoring belief. Belief that the number on the screen reflects reality. Belief that waiting or buying won't result in instant regret. Once that belief erodes, no algorithm can fix it overnight. What's pushing emotions over the edge is the sense that this isn't just about cars anymore. It's about affordability across the board. Rent, insurance, groceries, fuel. A used car price that feels inflated becomes symbolic of a system that keeps asking for more while giving less. That's why reactions are so intense. Every buyer who walks away tells a story. Every screenshot shared online spreads doubt. Every stalled deal adds to the weight pressing down on the market. CarMax may still be selling cars, but the momentum has clearly shifted, and when momentum shifts, outcomes follow. People are watching closely now, not just for deals, but for signs of surrender. The first real wave of aggressive price cuts. The first admission that the market has changed. The first crack big enough to signal that the stalemate is over. Until then, buyers remain on edge, refreshing listings, comparing notes, and bracing for what feels like an inevitable move that could finally break this deadlock and send shockwaves through the entire used car industry as the pressure continues to build with no clear release just yet. That sense of inevitability is what keeps the tension high. Everyone knows the market cannot stay frozen forever. The only question is who moves first. CarMax, buyers, lenders, or the broader economy. Each day without resolution adds more weight to the next move, making it more dramatic when it finally happens. What's changing now is patience. Buyers are setting harder limits. They're walking in with firm numbers and walking out without hesitation when those numbers aren't met. That kind of discipline didn't exist during the peak of the frenzy. It's a sign that fear has shifted sides. CarMax's pricing tools were designed for a fast-moving, demand-heavy environment. In a slower market, those same tools can lag, reacting to yesterday's demand instead of today's hesitation. That delay shows up as prices that feel stubborn, out of sync, and strangely resistant to obvious pressure. At the same time, incentives are becoming more creative. Free shipping, extended return windows, small perks meant to soften the blow without cutting the headline price. To buyers, that reads like avoidance. Nice extras don't fix a payment that doesn't work. The longer this goes on, the more buyers start looking for alternative paths. Car sharing, ride hailing, public transportation, even relocating closer to work. When consumers start questioning whether they need a car at all, the market has a serious problem. And this is where the story gets bigger than CarMax. Because when the largest used car retailer in the country struggles to align price, demand, and trust, it reveals stress points that extend far beyond one company. It hints at a consumer base that has reached its limit.